What just happened across the globe? Has the G7 finally decided to take bold action for Ukraine? And is this the moment that changes the war? Why is Israel preparing for a lone war? And what is Iran really hiding behind its night strikes? Is America celebrating or protesting? Trump's birthday parade turns into something no one saw coming. And deep inside Russia, explosions. Who launched the darling drone strikes that lit up Tatarstan and Kaliningrad? This is Ukraine Today. I'm Zorislava Kolesnikova and I'm here to break down the stories shaking the world. Stay with us, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Canada is preparing for a game-changing G7 summit. World leaders are gathering not just to talk but to act. The final day dedicated entirely to Ukraine. The rules changed. No more veto power blocking urgent decision. Now it's majority rules. Will this lead to further sanctions on Russia? Will Ukraine get the support it truly needs? Massive resolutions are on the table and the Kremlin is watching closely. This could be a turning point. Don't miss what's coming next.
Well, I would divide it here regarding the expectations from this year's G7. The New York Times put it very aptly just now. There was a big headline and it said that while in the past G7 leaders hoped and dreamed for the summit to be productive, now, as the New York Times wrote, they dream for the G7 to be, as they put it, boring. Why? We all understand. No one wants any surprises from Donald Trump. No one wants any of his improvisations, announcements, or discussions about a sudden change in policy. That's why everyone is hoping that the G7 will go, as the New York Times wrote, boringly. Of course, that's an exaggeration. But still, everyone is hoping, everyone is waiting that at least everything will go calmly. As for the Ukrainian topic, I spoke with the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada. I spoke with the Canadian ambassador to Ukraine, the current Madam Ambassador, and I heard that without Ukraine, without discussing the Ukrainian issue, the main topics of the G7 are simply impossible. Well, just imagine, for example, if Canada, and this is one of its priorities, wants to talk about strategic stability, wants to talk about stability in the world, then how can you discuss this without addressing the Ukrainian issue and without Ukraine's presence? So formally, there is Tuesday, when I look at the G7 schedule, a discussion is scheduled on issues that most directly concern Ukraine. There is hope. What I can say on air right now is that both the new Prime Minister of Canada invited President Zelensky, and President Zelensky said that he intends to attend. For now, let's leave it at that. But I can say for sure, based on what I hear here in Canada, that essentially the Ukrainian issue and Ukraine's presence are indispensable. I want to explain to you, the viewers, how everything will actually take place. We are currently in Calgary. Most of the delegations are here, as well as the press. But the press center will be located about an hour's drive from here, in the small mountain town of Banff, and nearby is the little mountain resort of Kananaskis, a ski resort with only a few hotels, which will be completely closed off. Only the press included in the presidential pool will be allowed in. Well, with badges like this one I have, though I'm not allowed to show it on camera, I'll show you the riverside. And of course, there will be presidents there will be delegations, and discussions will take place. Why is this being done? It's being done for maximum security. Because, for example, if everything were to take place, say, here in Calgary, it's clear that protests would be expected. It's also clear that there are concerns and fears that what is happening now in Los Angeles, for instance, could happen here in Canada as well. Interestingly, the Canadian police just held a press conference and said that they are preparing for absolutely every possible scenario. They are preparing to prevent mass clashes, and they are preparing to prevent demonstrations. In other words, the G7 will be held separately in Kananaskis, and the demonstrations will be held separately. And even since all of this is in the forest and the road goes through the woods, there is a separate team working, believe it or not, to make sure that wild animals don't wander onto the route where the motorcades of high-profile participants will pass. Basically, everything kicks off tomorrow. Tomorrow, the first high-level participants will arrive. Among those arriving is Donald Trump. In his schedule, I even see time allocated for bilateral meetings. Well, for now, they haven't announced which presidents or which leaders he will be meeting with. But just looking at the schedule, even on Tuesday, I see large time slots set aside. These time slots are intended not only for participating in the G7 discussions here, but also for holding bilateral meetings. And to finish up, to wrap things up, I'd like to tell you, I literally spoke just a few days ago with the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada, who for many years organized G7 summits, participated in them, came and had informal conversations with colleagues. And he told me, look, what you see on TV, the handshakes, the meetings, when the participants are just sitting around a big table, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I said, I asked, what do you mean, the tip? just 1/10 of the iceberg. Everything else, the other 90%, remains behind closed doors. And that includes the discussions between leaders, the arguments between leaders, and even possible conflicts between leaders. And of course, it's clear that this year there will be a lot of talk about Ukraine. In particular, and I've heard this from representatives of the Canadian side, there will be very detailed discussions about sanctions against Russia and about strengthening them. And a major issue will be how to prevent Russia from circumventing these sanctions. And most importantly, look, it has often happened that when the G7 takes place, a decision couldn't be made because one of the countries did not agree with the final statement, with the final declaration. There have even been meetings where there was no final document at all. Now, the principle is completely different. That is, if 5 countries, 4 countries, 6 countries, or 3 countries agree on a certain issue, they will come out with a separate resolution, separate proposals, and separate decisions. Well, and this will allow us to bypass the skepticism, the doubt that currently exists in the United States and with Donald Trump. And Canada, in fact, sees its role as organizing the other G7 countries, organizing and mobilizing them to support Ukraine both militarily and financially. And also, this is the most important message from the Ukrainian side too. Look for ways to put maximum pressure on Russia, not to persuade it to enter peace negotiations, but to force it into peace. Colleagues, Studio Kyiv.
We really hope so, Dmytro. Thank you. Special correspondent for Inter, Dmytro Onopchenko, reported on the latest preparations and expectations for the G7 summit.
What just happened in Israel will leave your specials. The unthinkable is becoming reality, and it's happening fast. Israel is preparing for a long war. New divisions are being mobilized. The stakes higher than ever. In this exclusive interview, political analyst reveals the hidden strategy behind Israel's latest moves. What are the real goals of the Israel military? Why is Iran striking at night? And what's happening inside Israel's borders that no one is talking about? This is not just another escalation, it's a turning point. The clock is ticking. Watch now before it's too late.
Can you tell us what the situation is at this moment? Are hostilities still ongoing, particularly from Iran's side?
At the moment, no. We are waiting for the night. They usually start in the evening because during the day, due to various restrictions, they are not able at all to load the necessary fuel for ballistic missiles. And can only do this at night. And only at night, yes, at night. That's the first thing. Secondly, in order to exhaust society with their limited capabilities after the preemptive strike, in my opinion, they will only act at night. That's why from 9 in the evening until 5 in the morning, we stay in protected places, in bomb shelters. And it's better to be in a bomb shelter because there are no buildings above them and so on. And you won't have to wait around for someone else to eventually come and find you under all the rubble and rescue you from the debris.
Mr. Arieh, please tell us, what is the Israeli government telling its citizens? How long could this confrontation last? What should people be prepared for?
Well, the Israeli authorities aren't telling us anything in that regard. Israeli society is ready to continue the war. We've been fighting it for almost 2 years now. There's not that much time left until October. Overall motivation in society is very high. The mobilization of reservists is very high. Right now, the 161 Division is being called up to strengthen the defense, to improve the quality of defense on the northern front, even though it's quite secure overall. But still, one way or another, there are Shiite militias. Although they are located almost in Iraq, they are capable of operating with UAVs, and all of that needs to be resisted. On the southern front as well, the destruction of Hamas continues, and Yemen continues here and there to send us 1 or 2 ballistic missiles toward Bab el-Yemen. Overall, the actions of the IDF can be described as very effective. We have complete air superiority over Iran, which overall provides a strategic breakthrough. And at this point, it would really be better for Iran to come to the negotiating table, to return to negotiations with the United States as soon as possible. In another scenario, they could indeed be left completely without an army.
Mr. Arieh, if I may, let me clarify. The main strategic goals of official Tel Aviv are to contain the development of the nuclear program, which was being worked on directly in Iran. Are there any other objectives that the country's authorities are pursuing?
I'll put it this way, the destruction of the regime is not an objective. In other words, for now, the regime still exists. What you mentioned is indeed correct. And besides that, generally speaking, as you may know, in the IDF, there is an understanding that if you achieve success, you need to build on it. I'm sure there is no need for any official statement that we will continue and build on these successes. The IDF does this both tactically and operationally and quite effectively. Moreover, the quieter it is, the better. In other words, if you don't hear anything, it means that actions are being carried out as they should be. As for maneuvers, it's clear they are only aerial. Well, as for encounters between our ground forces, they're simply impossible. We don't have a land border.
Regarding civilian aircraft, you mentioned that most of the combat operations take place at night. Can civilian planes take off during the day? How safe is that?
No, at the moment, the airspace is completely closed. No one is taking such risks. Unfortunately, our citizens who are abroad cannot return, nor can people who have arrived here leave the country. This could be delayed for at least another week. It depends on how effectively the success we've talked about will develop. And perhaps indeed the Iranians will come to understand that they really do need to return to negotiations, because at this point they have no chance of winning this war.
In the first hours when everything began, the authorities addressed the citizens, urging them to stock up on food and be prepared for various possible developments. At this moment, is there any panic? Do people have everything they need? How long will the food supplies last?
All the stores are open to customers today, so people can go out and shop as usual. Moreover, I want to let you know that this morning, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, which is the main financial market in Israel, where stocks and other securities are traded, also opened for business as scheduled. The market is currently in the green, which means that stock prices are going up overall.
Something unpredictable just happened in the US. A massive military parade rolled through city streets in honor of Army Day, and it just so happened to fall on Donald Trump's birthday. What is a trouble or political spectacle? While some waves flags and cheers, others took to the streets in fierce protest. Is this the start of a new American tradition or a dangerous drift toward authoritarian treaties? What message is the US really sending the world? You won't believe what unfolded. Stay with us, this one explosive.
Dozens of tanks, 50 helicopters and thousands of soldiers. America hasn't seen a spectacle like this since the Cold War. A military parade was held in Washington to mark the 250th anniversary of the American Army. At the same time, they also celebrated the president's birthday. While celebrations were underway in the American capital and other cities, thousands of people took to the streets to protest against Trump's policies. Yuri Hula will report on the events from across the ocean.
The center of Washington was transformed on the eve into a massive display of US military might. Thousands of soldiers and heavy equipment, all of this, became part of a grand parade in honor of the anniversary of the American Army. Tanks and artillery against the backdrop of the Capitol looked rather unusual. From the morning, anyone interested could take souvenir photos with the military equipment, and the crowd was entertained by robot dogs. The 250th anniversary of the country's army coincided with Donald Trump's 79th birthday, giving the event special symbolism. Next, soldiers marched, while the latest models of American military equipment circled in the air and drove through the streets of the capital. Donald Trump had been dreaming of his own parade since 2017, after witnessing a military show in France. He promised to make his parade better, louder, and more unforgettable than anything anyone had ever seen before. If I stake your name flame, I solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Today we commemorate an event that changed not only American history, but the history of the entire world. The creation of the US Army. According to preliminary estimates, $45 million were spent on the event. What worried the Washington authorities most was that their perfect roads would be ruined. However, the army promised to cover any repairs. The tracks of the tanks and other heavy equipment did leave their mark. And according to preliminary estimates, just repairing the roads will cost $16 million. While the army and the president were celebrating birthdays in the capital, nearly 2,000 demonstrations took place from California to New York. In such large numbers, Americans expressed their disagreement with the current administration's policies. They called their protest "No to Kings." No more cages ever again.
I'm a Native American, and I have to carry my documents with me because I realize I could simply be grabbed and arrested, torn away from my family without rights and without a single phone call.
Trump's critics believe that the parade became yet another example of the politicization of the military. The president himself claims that the show was necessary, and he insists that in the near future, the armed forces will be reinforced by thousands of new recruits. America loudly celebrated the 250th anniversary of its army and the president's birthday. However, while some rejoice in the display of greatness and national pride, others express concern for the future of democracy and civil liberties. These two polar realities highlight the divisions that currently exist in American society. Reporting from the USA, Yuri Hula, Ukraine Marathon, United News.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
What just happened on Russian soil? Unknown drones pretended over 1,500 kilometers deep to strike a Shahid drone factory in Tatarstan, and that's not all. In Kaliningrad, saboteurs from Ukraine's intelligence hit a key power substation, knocking out military infrastructure and causing millions in damage. 3 airports grounded, flights aimed drone threat panic. In Russia's rear, finally voluble. Is this the beginning of a new phase of warfare? Meanwhile, intense battles rage near Pokrovsk and Novopavlivka. Something big is unfolding. Stay tuned.
Meanwhile, agents of the main intelligence directorate attacked an industrial substation in Kaliningrad, cutting off power to facilities belonging to the Russian military-industrial complex and the army there. This was reported by our sources in Ukrainian intelligence. The operation was carried out on the morning of June 14th. They drained the cooling liquid from the transformer and set it on fire. The fire, in fact, significantly damaged the military infrastructure located nearby. The estimated losses for Russia are about $5 million. Most of the fighting on the front is currently taking place in the Pokrovsk direction, where the occupiers carried out 58 attacks just in the past day. However, the enemy has not crossed the Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka highway, according to the operational tactical group Kortitsia. Intense fighting is currently ongoing in the Novopavlivka direction, but there is no talk of Russian forces reaching the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region or of their permanent military presence there.
They are fighting very actively just to push the front line of demarcation toward the borders, toward the administrative borders. That's why, as of now, they are facing very strong resistance there. A large number of Russians are being eliminated. But even so, the number of combat clashes in the Novopavlivka direction is abnormally high.
Overall, the past day on the front saw 203 combat engagements. The Russians have become significantly more active in the Kursk direction. According to updated data from the General Staff, Ukrainian defenders repelled 39 assaults, which the enemy carried out under the cover of aviation and multiple launch rocket systems. Meanwhile, in the Lyman direction, the enemy has resumed attacks in the Serebryansky forest. Fighting for Torets continues. Overall, in this direction, Ukrainian soldiers had to repel 21 enemy assaults. Our aviation, missile forces and artillery struck 3 enemy command posts, as well as 7 areas where enemy personnel, weapons and military equipment were concentrated. The result of these attacks: 170 enemy personnel were neutralized, an air defense system, a multiple rocket launcher, 33 artillery systems, and nearly 90 enemy vehicles were destroyed. The Security Service of Ukraine has detained a Russian agent who was preparing missile strikes on military airfields in western Ukraine. The special operation was carried out in the Rivne region, where a 24-year-old man was caught literally in the act. He was in the process of filming a military facility with a hidden camera that he had installed in his own car. And like most traitors, he was recruited by Russian intelligence services through social networks where he was looking for easy money.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Your voice matters. Share this video to spread the truth. This video is made possible thanks to the support of our viewers and partners. Become a sponsor today and help us keep telling the truth. We will be back with more updates you won't want to miss. Stay strong, stay informed and stay with us.